We shouldn't rule out looking at legislation, Ed. There is a way forward here. Parliament could have the power to pass a particularly special law relating to these cases and to, in effect, through legislation, end this injustice.
And that's legislation you'd support?
I would. I think we need to look at that urgently. And whilst I'm not against the principle of private prosecutions, it's a very old principle. In fact, before we had the Director of Public Prosecutions in the 1870s, most prosecutions in this country were private. But we moved on from then. The vast majority of our prosecutions are public. And indeed, they're run by the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. And it seems to me that we need to make this move now, and that future prosecution should not be handled by this organisation.
And does it concern you, talking about prosecutions, that not a single member of the Post Office management appears to have been prosecuted? This police investigation that's been announced, presumably it'll be tortuous and long and expensive. Do you have any confidence that it'll result in a prosecution?
Well, look, I hope it does, frankly, because people need to be held to account. And let's not forget the important work that Sir Wyn Williams, who's chairing the independent inquiry, is doing. He's running a statutory inquiry with all the powers that he needs to summon witnesses and to come up with conclusions. I know Sir Wyn very well. I've appeared in front of him. I've worked with him. He's an outstanding lawyer and public servant, and I'm sure he's going to do a great job. But, time is ticking. And whilst we mustn't undermine or prejudge what the inquiry will say, I think there are actions that government can take now in order to address the question of compensation and indeed to look more globally at how to resolve this overall situation. And we shouldn't rule out looking at legislation, Ed. There is a way forward here. Parliament could have the power to pass a particularly special law relating to these cases and to, in effect, through legislation, end this injustice.
And that's legislation you'd support?
I would. I think we need to look at that urgently. It's an unprecedented situation. We've never seen such a great number of innocent people being wrongfully convicted, people providing an important service in our local communities who, because of a dodgy IT system, have ended up on the wrong side of the law, some of whom have lost their lives and many of whom are living with their families with the consequences of it. And therefore, an exceptional series of cases like this requires an exceptional response. And that's why I think legislation should be considered now.
Excellent. And just very quickly, you were the Justice Secretary between 2019 and 2021. This issue must have crossed your desk. What was your experience?
Yeah, I remember, of course, my friend and colleague Paul Scully, the minister responsible, was very proactive. And I, together with other cabinet colleagues and the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson, agreed that there should be an inquiry, which we then converted into a full statutory inquiry on the request of the chair. And that was done in the summer of 2021. I remember feeling then at the time, with my background in criminal law, extremely concerned and troubled by what I was learning about this process and about what innocent people had been through. And it was reported at the time correctly that consideration was being given into whether or not a review into the honours that had been issued to certain leading people in the Post Office should be conducted by the Forfeiture Committee. Now, I think that should happen, and I would welcome such a review with a view to a decision being made by that independent committee about the receipt of honours by people connected with this scandal.
Well, let's get that clear, Robert. You, when you were Justice Secretary, wanted a review of the honours, which would have included the Paula Vennells CBE, which one of my listeners has texted in, says the CBE stands for Can't Blame Executives. You were looking at an inquiry by the Honours Committee to strip her of her CBE, but then you were moved on as Justice Secretary.
Yes, I didn't have any time, sadly, to follow through. And of course, it is for the Independent Forfeiture Committee. That's chaired by Sir Chris Wormald, the Permanent Secretary, and the Treasury Solicitor, Susanna McGibbon, is a member of it. They've got to do that independently, not for ministers to start getting involved in that. But I did feel sufficient. I think it was quoted, I was exercised about this at the time, as was Boris Johnson, because I think we all felt, and Paul Scully deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. I think that we all felt that this was a growing scandal that could not be ignored, and was clearly the biggest miscarriage of justice we've ever seen in our country. And as somebody who believes in our system, who's worked in it, who's dealt with thousands of, hundreds of jury trials, dealt with thousands of cases, I feel it personally when I see something as fundamental as this going wrong with our system of justice. It tarnishes our whole system, and therefore it's incumbent on all of us to put these wrongs right.